Hi, chat. Okay, here we go. Let's go. I'm gonna sing, guys. How soon is soon? It's not Blizzard soon. I'm gonna do some Barb action today, but I think I'm gonna start with a bit of Rogue. Log in, yes. Yeah, been a bit hectic here, so I'm still finishing my little bread. Objectives today is I'm probably gonna make my Flay Barb. So I have a character for tormented bosses. Maybe I'll try a bit of pit running with the Barb as well. Ah, we have a world boss in 18 minutes, by the way. That's kinda cool. I've not yet made a planner for Flay. I'm not sure if I really want to completely wing it. Maybe I should work on that as well. Hello, Lucky J, by the way. Got an update patch today. Yeah, we had one last night. Like, was like a small bug fix patch and stuff. Have you seen the roadmap in Discord? What roadmap? Double dip with crit multi. Yeah, is there some double dipping going on? Rex made a roadmap in paint. Where is that in a default discussion or what? Oh boy. Okay. Okay. Wait, season 4 patch notes. Patch 18th. Campfire. Spiritborn, season 5, mid-season patch. Yeah, I think there's no chance we're gonna get a season 5 mid-season patch. Yeah, okay, I mean, it's basically just all the dates listed that we already know. Besides mid-season patch and season 5 is unknown, and some of the other dates are a bit of a question mark. What am I eating? It's basically pizza bread, I guess. I was hashtag sponsored by Nini again today. The surprise tornado druid is S tier on max form. Do we still have an S? I think it's not an S anymore. But yeah, I mean, mid-season patch notes are coming tomorrow, so this means we're probably gonna have a new tier list on Saturday anyway. And whatever is left over, we're gonna fix. Yeah, we don't have Tornado on S. This was on season start. It's here now, bottom of A. We still need to put Andariel's rogue here, so we're probably gonna do it in a Saturday meeting as well. We have Andariel's guide now. I guess it's gonna go here as number 6, or here as number 1. It's probably where Andariel's will go. And then I guess we'll see what the patch notes say tomorrow. Zorian. I didn't actually reply to you about the build. We can do that now, maybe. Can link it here again? Since I am still chilling a little bit. Can do a little build review. Don't think I will nerf anything in mid-season. Yeah, it would be kind of strange. Because, you know, something like Gushing Wounds needs like potentially an actual rework. I mean, how will they nerf Gushing Wounds to be not completely busted? You know? They would have to nerf it by like 90%. Or something like that. You know, right now, as far as I know, Gushing Wounds is working as intended. So they have to like Omega nerf it. And I don't think they will do that. The thing is, if they don't change anything on Barb, because it's not really bugged, will they change bugs like Victimize? And the answer to that is probably also no, because, for example, even Victimize rogues are still worse than the non-bugged Barb. So it's not even a huge problem that Victimize is currently, you know, a bit stronger than it should be. Is Gushing busted? No, it's Gushing Wounds that's busted. I mean, basics in general are pretty powerful these days. But the real kicker is Gushing Wounds. Gushing Wounds is a key passive that is like somewhere in the range of 15 to 50 times more powerful than other key passives in the game. So it's pretty good. I think they'll buff Frozen Orb, Dust Devils, Massive Buffs, or Druid. I think instead of doing all of this, it's not unlikely they might change pits a little bit. Maybe they're gonna change pits, boss fights, you know, scaling of monsters and whatever. But maybe this is a Season 5 thing or an expansion thing. How is Gushing Wounds so good? Explain. Okay, I can explain. So, you play Barb. I don't have like a full plan now right now. But let's just say you play Barb. You go Gushing Wounds, yeah? When causing an enemy to bleed, you have a chance equal to a crit chance to increase the bleed damage amount by 140% X of a critical strike bonus. Now here's a funny thing about these key passives. As far as I know, every single key passive that works in a way like this, that scales off a specific stat, is bugged. Because it doesn't actually take the crit damage that you have, it takes the crit damage value that it shows in your sheet. So you have like, you know, your character sheet in the game. Like here, it says crit damage, and right now I have 0% crit damage, but it says 50%. Same with vulnerable here, right? I have 87% vulnerable damage because I have it on some item somewhere. I'm not sure where that's coming from actually, maybe from Paragons. But what you see here is it actually says 124% vulnerable damage. Because what the game does is it takes your additive damage, the 87%, and then starts multiplying it, and then adds the 20% on top of it. So to arrive to this number, the 124.4%, you have to do 124.4 minus 20 divided by 1.2. And you see this is the 87. This is the actual vulnerable damage I have on my build. But the game thinks I have 124 because Blizzard math. And the same happens with overpower stuff, the same happens with crit damage stuff, because it always takes the base multiplier of those effects and then multiplies your additive damage with that, puts it in the sheet, and adds the base multiplier as a flat value again. So this is kind of how that works. It's completely stupid, because this is not how the damage is actually calculated. You know, the damage is actually calculated in, you know, I have 87% extra additive damage, and that's it, you know, and then times 1.2, all of it. You know, this is how the game actually works. But in the sheet, it's just a completely stupid number. So what happens with Gushing Wounds is, you have a lot of crit damage, because you can roll it on your gear, you have a lot of weapons, you can temper it on a lot of gear, because rogues, and suddenly you're running around with like 3000% critical strike damage on your gear or something like that. And then you get this times 1.5 multiplier again from, you know, Blizzard math. So you add 4,500 or something, and then you get 140% of that value as the Gushing Wounds multiplier. Now you divide this by 100, so you get a times I don't know exactly how much exactly the perfect gear barbs have, but in this case, you will get a times 63 multiplier to your bleed damage every time that you roll a crit chance. So you just roll a bunch of crit chance, and you can easily hit like 70-80% crit or so on a good barb. And then every time that happens, well, your bleeds do roughly 2 more zeros of damage. So Gushing Wounds is completely broken in the with the scaling. It's just completely busted. You know, like some of the other like really powerful key passes in the game include, I mean, Victimize right now, but this is like a very special thing. But it also has this Blizzard Math function with vulnerable damage. It's exactly the same shit. Here, it says current damage increase 149%. You know where that's coming from? 120% of my vulnerable damage. Yeah, you see this? 149 divided by 1.2. Well, 124. Have you seen that before? Hell yeah, you have. It's exactly this number here. And exactly like this, Gushing Wounds works. Exactly like this, Precision works. Which is just completely stupid. And Precision, for example, is one of the next best key passes in the game. It's really powerful. It gives you guaranteed crits on combo point builds. And so it has like really strong natural synergy with combo points. And this is why rogue, like ranged rogues, are so busted compared to melee rogues, because of Precision. Well, these days also because of the victimized bugs, and because there's several like problems that not melee rogues also have. But Precision is a really huge factor in why ranged rogue is so much better than melee rogue right now. Because they made Precision completely broken. Like, number one, you get a guaranteed crit, you don't need really crit chance on your gear. And then you get this crit scaling, and you deal extra damage as well. So you deal 50% increased crit damage, and then you get even more based on a critical strike damage bonus. On a good rogue, you have something like a 400% bonus here or something. So you do like times 5 damage, guaranteed crit, and you don't need to roll crit damage, so that can go to other stats. So Precision gives you something like a times 5 to times 10 multiplier for range builds if you play combo points. Only for combo point builds. For non-combo point builds, it's significantly weaker because you have to stack the Precision first. But for combo point builds, you get it every time. You have the full combo, and it's busted. Like, Precision is also busted. You wouldn't think that rogues with Precision are necessarily busted, but if you look at the power level that this single point gives compared to any other key passive in the game outside of Gushing Wounds, Precision is also ridiculously powerful. You know, the typical key passes are somewhere in the range of like 20% damage, 30% damage, maybe 50 if you're lucky. Precision is like 500 or 1000. And then comes Gushing Wounds, and Gushing Wounds is just like 8000% damage, you know. It's just broken. That's how it is. You know, they can literally take this key passive here, you know. Wait, let me see. Let me do this, yeah. So we do this, yeah. You take this. You can do this if you want. And this would most likely still be the best key passive in the game. So this is where it's at right now. Yeah. This is Gushing Wounds, guys. Anyway. Rant is over. Yeah, fun on your own bleed, Barb. I mean, I don't want anyone to not have fun, you know? Don't get me wrong. Of course I want people to enjoy the game. But I also want the game to kind of make sense, you know? I want it to not be bugged. I want it to not have completely broken builds. I want it to be, you know, somewhat balanced so I don't feel bad for playing one thing over the other, you know? And if you look at Barbs, everyone says, oh, 4 weapons, Barbs are crazy. And it does contribute a little bit because the devs don't seem to balance around the fact that Barbs have 4 weapons. It would be easily balanceable. But everyone says, oh, they have 4 weapons, they will always be better. That's not the reason. It's just bad balancing. But what is actually the reason is that they have some mechanics like Gushing Wounds that are just completely broken. That's how it is. If you nerf Gushing Wounds, then barbs in general will be much more reasonable. And also stuff like flay duration actually increasing not just the buff of the flay, but also the total damage output of flay by a ridiculous amount. So we have flay barbs now. You just temper like, you know, plus 600% flay duration. Well, that's not just a buff to the, you know, look at Heartseeker duration, right? Rogues have Heartseeker duration. That's actually a mod that you can put on your weapons. It's the same thing as flay duration, yeah? Same slot, similar values. We have 2 less weapons on, or 1 less weapon on the rogue. We have Heartseeker duration. You know what Heartseeker duration does? Well, it gives you a slightly longer attack speed buff that will never run out anyway. And it gives you a slightly longer crit damage buff that will never run out anyway. And another slightly longer crit buff that will never run out anyway. So Heartseeker duration does literally nothing. Flay duration gives you a 700% damage multi. So, you know, these kind of things just don't make sense. You know, it makes no sense. That's how it is. So, like these, you know, the stuff is like somewhat balanced. In like, if there was no legendary aspects and no tempering and no uniques, I think the game would actually be like somewhat in a balanced state. But then you start adding all this stuff, and then you add a bunch of build math and a bunch of bugs, and suddenly you have barbs ticking for 100 billion damage with Rupture. And that's how it works. These are called features, XCD business. Same thing with Earthquake duration. It's almost like they just throw a bunch of stuff in the pot and see what comes out. Yeah, I mean, hello. I understand that, you know, the player base knows the game better than the devs. You know, like the collective, basically, right? And the blasters. Like, we know mechanics that the devs are not aware of. We know bugs that the devs are not aware of. You know, all this kind of stuff. But just from like design perspective, a lot of these things don't make much sense. Like, it may actually be not intended that flay duration actually increases the duration of the dot. Maybe it was just supposed to be the buff. This was my expectation. When I saw the flay duration, I was like, yeah, okay, they probably just mean the buff, right? Like, it gives you a bit of a damage reduction buff for a few seconds and stuff like that. And I was like, okay, fine. You know, similar to Heartseeker duration. Yeah, then it turns out, no, flay duration actually increases the duration of the dot. So you stack up like a 40-second dot and then you rupture it out, boom, you know? And that makes no sense. You know, at least with those values they put. Like, if they take the flay duration mod and they cut the 0 from it, and then it's like, you know, plus 5% flay duration, or, I don't know, plus 10% flay duration, instead of plus 100%, yeah, then, you know, maybe it's more reasonable. Yeah, imposing presence ranks, man. Who the fuck came up with that? It's crazy. Like, I didn't actually know about some of these crazy tempers on the Barb because I didn't play that much Barb on the PTR because it was like, you know, all this like Dust Devil stuff, and it was really hard to get those temper recipes, so I didn't really like investigate that too much. It was like I didn't have much time for it basically at the end of the PTR. I did a lot of stuff on Necro, Rogue, and Sorc and everything, but Barb was kind of the thing that I knew the best anyway outside of Rogue, and I felt like fine and didn't have enough time. But then comes the life patch, and I look at all these tempers, and I see imposing presence, martial vigor, and then you see flay duration, and you see the bash cleave, and I'm just like, what the fuck happened here? Like, how did no one complain about this? Like, it's crazy. I don't know, man. What? You don't have 500,000 life? Dude, people come to my stream and they say, what? You have 50,000 life? How did I get that much? And then it's like Barb in the other corner. No, thanks, iced coffee, by the way. That's a big dono. What's up? You try making a unique build and get stomped for it. I just wish abilities were more balanced. Yeah, I'm just on a big balance rant right now, actually. I mean, with more game knowledge comes, you know, more opportunities to make memes possible. I don't know what you're trying to do. I mean, the baseline is that you can play almost anything, at the very least to level 100, take down the bosses, if you're really good, even the tormented bosses, because they don't necessarily have like a huge DPS check or something. So, and you can get to like Pit 61. I think Pit 61, like any shit build can get there if you really want to. It may not be easy, it may not be very fast, but technically you can kind of get anything done in the game that is not like super high pits. As long as you get to Pit 61, you can basically get anything in the game, at least slowly. But of course, you know, if you play like a shit build and you're not as experienced, then you have like two factors working against you. And, you know, you're most likely better off with like a better... You don't have to play only S or A tier builds, you know. Even B and even C tier builds are perfectly suited to kind of just do anything in the game already. So you don't have to only stick to like the top 5 builds or something like that. There's plenty of good builds that you can play. There's a website for the magnetic posters. They're called Displayed. Wait, let me link it. Where would ice shards fall? Yeah, ice shards has like no boss damage as far as I know, so basically any build that doesn't have great boss damage is kind of a weak build currently, because single target damage is the only thing that matters to really get any hard content done in the game. There's like nothing where you care about having a lot of AoE damage. It's all about single target damage. You need to take down those pit bosses, you need to take down those tormented bosses. Basically every build that doesn't have a good single target, and you would think that Ice Shards has a good single target, right? Because of, you know, you shoot like this machine gun into one guy. But the truth is that Ice Shards is actually a ridiculous AoE build. It's actually not a single target build. It doesn't have single target damage. It's very good in AoE, it's very bad in single target. It's kind of interesting. Shake my head, Barb's tempering imposing presence, and we can't temper Dark Shard ranks. I mean, Dark Shard's ranks would be pretty busted as well. I mean, realistically, they just need to completely delete this entire Barb protection manual, I think, next season. And then it's already looking much better. Best single target rogue build is Rapid Fire. All Sorc builds feel like they're bad for single target. Yeah, that's true. I mean, Sorc suffers from the same disease that rogues suffer, which is you don't deal damage outside of stagger. It's probably slightly less impactful than in the rogues, but it's pretty much the same thing. So that is like problem number one. And Sorcs generally have like high AoE damage and low single target damage. It's just how all of the builds work. Like, there's no Sorc build that actually has like any single target capacity. I guess the closest is Firebolt. But yeah, I mean, look at the skills, right? Incinerate, that's an AoE skill. Fireball, that's absolutely an AoE skill. Frozen Orb, that's an AoE skill. Ice Shards, well, what I just explained, you would think it's a single target skill, but it's actually not. Based on, you know, like the Ice Shards enchant and all that, it's actually an AoE build. Then you have Chain Lightning, that's just weak as fuck anyway. Chain Lightning would probably be the closest to like a single target ability, I guess. And then you have Charged Bolts that just no one has ever used in the history of Diablo 4. Besides stupid me. And then we have Blizzard that just does no damage. Then we have Meteor that also does no damage and is mostly an AoE skill. Then you have Firewall that does no damage and is mostly an AoE skill. And then you have Bow Lightning that is mostly an AoE skill. So there's not a single skill that's even remotely like a single target skill, like any kind of single target option, right? It just doesn't exist. You don't have it on the Sorc. There's no skill that does single target that you can use, you know, like Rapid Fire. No, Rapid Fire is like a build suited for single target. Well, it has kind of moved away from that now with Scoundrel's Kiss. But yeah, Rapid Fire is just the single target skill, right, on Rogue. It's just good. And I mean, you have other stuff on other classes as well, right? It is like more suited for single target. And some other builds that are more suited for AoE, and it's kind of fine that certain builds work a certain way. But I think what you really need is like an actual like way to scale single target damage for every build, right? In Diablo 3 we had Reign of the Stricken that kind of like solved that problem for every build in the game. Because you went higher, the bosses became tankier, you can't increase your boss DPS, you can only increase your AoE damage by going to higher tiers. So at some point they made Reign of the Stricken, which just solved that problem for everyone. And it was like a kind of interesting band-aid, but it actually did the job really well. And honestly, I would not be too opposed to a similar mechanic again. Maybe with a bit of a tweak. Like, we need to make sure that we don't completely trivialize, for example, tormented bosses and stuff like that with Reign of the Stricken mechanic. But yeah, I mean, maybe you can also just, like, you know, make certain uniques or make certain legendary aspects, or, you know, give maybe some extra single target options on passives and legendary glyphs or whatever, right? There could be some options to kind of like build in some single target damage when you need it. Like, you know, extra boss damage here, or, you know, like you have like some scaling damage up to a certain point maybe that increases over the duration of a long combat. There would be some ways to do that. And that would kind of just help out all of these shitty single target builds, which in this case for Sorc is just every single build, and actually just elevate the entire class. Stricken benefit higher attack speed more than lower attack speed. Yeah, Stricken did have its problems, you know. I'm not 100% on board with just copying Stricken and putting it into Diablo 4, and that's what I'm saying. But it wouldn't be so bad to, you know, make something along those lines, you know. That it's like not, maybe not even uncapped, you know. Maybe there is like a mechanic, like, let's say there's a legendary aspect. And it says, you know, when you hit an enemy, you increase the damage done to the target by 2% per second up to 100%. You know, so over 50 seconds, you scale up your damage to plus 100% damage, which would be a pretty powerful aspect if the fight lasts for like half a minute or longer, you know? The typical offensive aspect, when you don't have anything super specific to the build, is something like 15 to 20% damage, right? Like an Edge Masters and Elements. These are like the standard aspects, right? So we need roughly 30 seconds of combat to break even with such an aspect, and if it's longer than that, you would start doing more damage later. So this would be, you know, something like a Bane of the Stricken that you can just slot in, you know, you put it, if you want really on a two-handed or something, or an amulet, if you really want that boss damage. And this would kind of give you a way out for a lot of these builds, to at least not feel absolutely terrible on bosses. The game should be balanced around scaling a single target ability and a clear ability. That's not how the game works, right? We just did a massive step away from that. We just made a massive step towards hyper specialization into one ability, away from, you know, dual core builds. You know, Flurry RF is dead, Pen RF is dead, you know, Fireball Meteor is dead. Like, all these things are just dead now because of the tempers, for example. In addition to all of the aspects that only work with a certain thing, or the uniques that work with a certain thing. You know, we have Scoundrel's Kiss now on the Rogue. Like, Pen RF, like, you would never dream of playing Rapid Fire without Scoundrel's Kiss now. And like, just doing Pen RF as a single target skill, it just doesn't work anymore. So this is just dead. Now, what they could do is they could add tempers that give you like a generic, maybe slightly lower value of, you know, core skills have a chance to cast twice, instead of Pen Shot has a chance to cast twice, and Rapid Fire has a chance to cast twice. This is actually what we need. You know, we need tempers that say the same thing, but for all skills. So make it like the jackpot temper, right? Here, you have Barrage, Rapid Fire, Pen Shot, and then let's say, make it a slightly lower value, let's say 20 to 30% instead of 26 to 35, and say your ranged or your marksman core skills have a 20 to 30% chance to cast twice. And boom, suddenly you have a bit of an option again. But right now you don't have an option to even play something like Pen RF, because you have the tempers, because you have Scoundrel's Kiss, because you have the trick shot aspect that you throw in there. So there's like a lot of opportunity costs for, you know, investing into a certain skill. You also have to give up the skill points on your tree. There's a lot of problems with that. And they need to like make really powerful options for these dual skill builds. But as I explained, for example, on Sorc, there is no way to make a single target damage Sorc. It just doesn't exist. As I said, like, maybe the closest thing is like Firebolt Sorc. If you have like a really beefed up Firebolt Sorc, that is kind of a single target build, that would be, you know, acceptable. But then again, like how do you integrate Firebolt, including the gloves, including all of the burning scaling and all that, into a Frozen Orb build? It doesn't work, right? You have completely different scaling. This one needs crit, this one needs, you know, dot damage or something, and this one needs fire, this one needs cold. Like, you don't have any options. There's like no elemental damage for your gear, right? There's no like synergy between the different legendary nodes. Like, you just have to specialize into a certain thing and then go all in, and this is how the game works. This is exactly how it was in Diablo 3 with the sets, and, well, even before the sets, we kind of did that, but there was a bit more variety, and like, you know, using this skill together with that skill. You had like a cooldown for a nuke, and you had your normal ability. But in the way that we are moving in Diablo 4 right now is we go more and more towards hyper-specialized builds and away from any kind of combinations. And they need to give us more options for this stuff. You know, we have stuff like core skill ranks on gloves, which is kind of nice. You know, core skill ranks on gloves. But why is it only 2? Why is it not the same as individual core skill ranks, you know? It's because they just like copied the same system that they have for defensive skills or for whatever skills, right? You get 2 to 3 for one, or you get 1 to 2 for all of them. And they did the same here, but the problem is the opportunity cost is way higher on the glove. Because here you get 2 to 3 to your main skill, or you get 1 to 2 to your main skill. And if you have multiple core skills, you can only cast one of them at a time. It's not like defensive skills, where you can, you know, you can press your ice armor, you can press your flame shield, you can press your teleport. You have all of them in the same build. Of course, it's nice to have ranks to all of them, but the same does not apply to core skills. For core skills, you just have a clear downside if you have this over having an individual skill rank. So why is core skill ranks a lower value than the individual skills? It makes no sense. You know, this could be just like the jackpot roll, and you say, okay, I have a glove, it has 2 to 3 to all core skills, just like the individuals, and it would slowly move us towards a direction where we could combine different skills. But right now, you know, the opportunity cost is just way too high. And it's just like a small factor, right? Like this one rank on your core skill missing is not the reason why you don't play double core skill builds, right? This is not the reason why Flurry F is dead, but it does contribute, you know? This is just like another, you know, 5% chipped away at the viability of double core skill builds. And then you have other stuff, you know? I talked about the key passes earlier. Like precision. Precision is like a, you know, ×5 to ×10 damage buff for ranged builds for rogue. And then you have close quarters, that's like, on a good day, a ×2. Right? But if you want to play Flurry RF, you play close quarters, because you need to buff the Flurry somehow, else your Flurry is going to do absolutely nothing. It already does almost nothing, and without this, it will do absolutely nothing. So you would never do Flurry RF without close quarters. But if you play close quarters, you don't have precision. If you don't have precision, your Rapid Fire does like less than half of its normal damage. So why do you even want to use Rapid Fire, right? It makes no sense. There's like no synergy. You can't combine these skills. It just doesn't work. Because this is too weak, but you need it to buff Flurry. And this is too strong, and you need to play Rapid Fire with it for Rapid Fire to be good. So it's just, you know, the balancing is just so far off, because they just, you know, take one thing at a time and buff it to the moon, like Precision in Season 3. You know, it's like completely crazy. And now it just kills Flurry AF, and that's it. And even if they like mega buff close quarters, you would still be far away from any kind of viability because of the other problems that I discussed, you know, with the tempers, and then the core skill ranks, and then, yeah, you know, you have like so much opportunity cost to go for like a double core skill build, right? You need like 5 more skill points as well. You need to, like, you know, max it out here, and you know, you lose out some passives, and, you know, that gives you like, you know, some, like, in standard passive point is like 3% damage or toughness or so. So you have to just kind of give up like another, I could say 15% or so, just to actually get those skill points in there as well, right? You have like so many things working against you here. And there's no like legendary Paragon node, you know, that, for example, facilitates any kind of like combos between different core skills. Like, we have Tricks of the Trade that was probably intended to kind of do something like that, but the reality is, it is basically not used for anything, because if you want to do any kind of damage on a melee build, you have to play with poison, and Tricks of the Trade does not actually apply to poison damage. So it doesn't apply to poison imbuement, which is all of your damage in a typical melee build, on the high end at least. So it would apply to like melee builds where you use puncture for your comp points as the marksman skill, and then you have the cutthroat bane skill. So this is usually how Trickster Trade is used. However, this is not a viable endgame strategy. You need poison to do anything, and even then it sucks. And then you have the range builds that obviously don't wanna like, you don't wanna like invigorating strike or blade shift the enemy to get the Trickster Trade buff and then shoot your barrage. It's just kind of clunky. You don't wanna be in melee range just to get this buff. There are actually setups that do this. In fact, we have done this. In fact, I think the highest pencil clear in the world, at least on the maximum leaderboard, did exactly this, which is a strategy from back in AOZ times. I played exactly that same build as well. Back then with Poison, we used Blade Shift to build comp points very fast in melee range. But in fact, again, we did not use Trickster Trade because it doesn't work with Poison Imbuement. However, this would be a way to do it. It's just that, you know, this is probably supposed to produce a double core setup, but the reality is it doesn't work because we play comp points. So it doesn't really function. And you kind of don't have any options for these things. So there's just like not enough synergies, not enough power that you can earn. There's like no, you know, kind of like generic boosts that you can take. Everything is specific, you know, this is only puncture, this is only Heartseeker, this is only barrage, this is only rapid fire. Like, it doesn't work. There's nothing that we can take here that would help us. Only way is to go all in on Sorc, full upturn on Flame Shield, and up all of the defensive aspects, glyphs and nodes. Yeah, I mean, this is obviously completely stupid. Like, the entire Sorc class is just in like a terrible state right now because of this Feral Flame Shield stuff. And I mean, we told them, you know, before the season started, on the PTR, we said, guys, it's so easy to have Perma Flame Shield. This is broken, something needs to be done. And then Blizzard's answer to that was, yeah, we nerfed Hectic by 50%. Which, honestly, is a fine nerf, you know, in general. I think Hectic was too OP. But it did not solve the problem of Sorcs, right? You don't even need Hectic to become perma-invulnerable on a Sorc. You can do it with Ice Blades. So... Now Sorcs are bottomed here. I mean, technically, they have pushed the highest in solo compared to other classes. But yeah. I mean, Sorcs have gotten a lot better since the last patch, where they fixed the vulnerable damage stuff. Because they were suffering the most from that, with Shredding Blades aspect and all that. Storms were not working properly. So there was a nice little boost there for Sorcs. And Sorcs are generally not bad. It's just that the game currently does not allow Sorcs to thrive as much as other classes, because what I just explained, there is no single target damage on the entire Sorc class, and single target damage is the only thing that matters in high end. If you can't kill the boss, you lose. Anything else is not a problem. You have to kill the boss. And none of the core skills, none of the master skills on the Sorcs are in any way suited to kill bosses. That's how it is. Yeah, I don't think you can just say, oh, I want Frozen Orb to be buffed, I want Meteor to be buffed. Like, you need to do a real single target solution, you know, that applies to everything. Because I'm always going to have this problem. Like, next time people are going to say, oh, I want Charged Bolts to be buffed. Like, how much do you want to buff these skills to feel good on bosses? If you make them really powerful, let's say you make, you know, let's say you give like a ×3 damage buff to Frozen Orb and to, you know, ×5 to Meteor and ×5 to Ball Lightning. So that those builds can also push, let's say, 120, 130, whatever, right? Like the top builds. Then Sorcs are going to be just completely busted. because they have so much AoE damage. They're just gonna walk in, they're gonna destroy everything. It's gonna be like Season 2 all over again with the ball lightning. So you can't do that. You have to give them single target damage without really buffing the AoE damage. It's not even necessarily a problem of the bosses being too spongy, although that should also be addressed in general. But also just the single target tools that Sorcs have are just terrible, right? At least other classes do have single target tools that are kind of generic enough. Look at rogues, we have Exploit Weakness. Exploit Weakness is a extremely powerful legendary node. It's 25% extra damage that mostly works against bosses and not that often against most other targets. You know, most other targets, you one shot, two shot, whatever, you get nothing. So Exploit Weakness is an example of a very well designed legendary Paragon node. It can be used by any build on a class, and it helps you to solve a problem that the class generally has, which is boss damage. Anyone has a boss damage problem these days, but rogues in particular because of all the stagger shenanigans. So it helps you to deal with bosses more than it helps you to deal with anything else, and this is excellent. You know, we need more stuff like Exploit Weakness that you can invest into to solve that boss damage problem. But this doesn't exist. You know, Sorcs don't have that. Sorcs have like these few generic like Frigid Fate board and whatever. Technically, a Frigid Fate board is supposed to be a cold board, but every single Sorc build uses it because it's just like a 30% damage upgrade. But there's like nothing like Exploit Weakness that, you know, benefits you more on the boss and less in other situations. This is what you really need. You need something that benefits you more on the boss than it does in other situations. I think bosses being able to be soft CC'd would help some builds. It would certainly help Sorcs and Rogue, especially Rogue a lot, as melee rogues. Like, I mean, look at this. This is actually a close quarters build, right? If you could soft crowd control bosses, you'd permanently benefit from damage to crowd controlled enemies. And right now, this build, it's not even like maxed out. I have like over 800% here. This is like 2/3 of my entire additive damage. If I could soft crowd control bosses the entire time, I would do triple the damage. Just like that. The entire fight. Until I stagger the boss. And then I don't do triple, I just do whatever I do during the stagger. And then I go back to triple. When the boss is not staggered. So most of the damage will still be the stagger, but I will actually be able to fight the boss. And, you know, see the health bar move. Even when the boss is not staggered. Anyway, I started blasting. Haven't actually played a single run yet. And also missed the world boss, F. Wait, that's 119. Rant, yeah, was a nice rant. Maybe I should upload it. Now say something nice about the game. I mean, I didn't mean to say that I don't like the game. I just mean that to say that they really need to get their balancing together. You know, there's a lot of problems between the different classes, and, you know, problems that individual classes have even in a vacuum of, you know, not comparing them to other classes. And a lot of stuff they need to address, you know. Like Paragon boards are outdated, glyphs are outdated. Why do magic glyphs even exist? Like in the expansion they announced there's going to be legendary glyphs. They have not announced that they're going to rework magic glyphs or delete magic glyphs at least, or something like that, right? Like, if they really want to keep magic glyphs around without making them viable, I think what they should do is they should just delete every single one of these magic glyphs and leave one of them that does nothing else but just a generic % damage buff, that would apply to basically any build in a similar way, and that's it. Just leave like one magic glyph around or something. Why do we have like 6 magic glyphs that no one ever... Like, I have never even slotted a magic glyph, I believe. Anyway, I mean, maybe legendary glyphs will be part of the solution here. Maybe they will do something cool, maybe they will be generic enough to give us these options that are explained. For example, what I talked about with the exploit weakness board on rogues, right? Something that helps you solve a problem that your build may have, you know? Like, it's fine to make specific effects for specific builds, you know? I think it's fine that certain builds have a certain feel to it and a certain mechanic that only works for that, you know? Let's say, Wither on Necromancer, right? You want to stack int a lot in order to scale your dot damage for blight builds or, you know, whatever. And for Shadow Surfer. That's okay, you know, this is just how these Necro dot builds work, you know, and it's fine. Or like, I don't know, Icefall board on a Sorc, right? This is just how Sorc cold builds work. You pick that thing, and this is part of it. Burning Instinct, you know, okay, Sorcs have like this Burning Instinct thing, and if you play a fire dot build on Sorc, then you also scale crit damage for Burning Instinct, for example. And this is how fire Sorcs work, and this is okay. You know, if you kind of force people to take a certain thing, and that makes it what it is. The problem is, if you then don't give them any other options to do anything else. You know, there is nothing else that I can take that would help me. So I'm shoehorned into taking this one choice that makes the thing, but then there's nothing else that even remotely helps me. Where I can say, okay, I want to boost my AoE damage. Okay, I want to boost my single target damage. You know, like an exploit weakness Paragon node from rogues. You know, I can always slot it in. And right now, like every single rogue build does that because you need single target damage. But, you know, there may be builds where you don't care, you don't take exploit weakness. You know, as an option. It works for every build. But stuff like this almost does not exist for other classes. Like, rogues have kind of like a big advantage there. I mean, Barbs have some stuff like this, like, you know, every build just goes Blood Rage, some builds go Carnage, some builds go Decimator, and, you know, you have like these kind of generic damage nodes that you just pick as a Barb. And then you have a few like kind of build-specific ones, and this is, you know, what makes a certain build, and this is fine, you know? It's fine to have both. To have like one thing that is forced into a certain playstyle, and another thing that is options. But some classes don't even have options, you know? Look at Necromancer Paragon boards. Every time I make a Necromancer build, I despair. Because I look at the Paragons, and then there's this one Golem thing, there's the one Minion thing, there's the one Bone thing, the one Blood thing, and then there is nothing generic. There is nothing that I can put into my build that I would care about on any of those Paragon boards, outside of this one thing that I really need. And that's it. You know, there's no options. Every time, man, I look at those Necromancer Paragon boards, and it's just a horror. It's crazy. Because they're just way too specialized and have way too few boards. That's basically it. You know, there's way too few boards. There's only 8 boards. They made like this, you know, 8 boards per class. And I think that's fine for like version 1.0. It's not fine for version 1.42. You know, like I'm actually flabbergasted that we have not received any new Paragon nodes since launch. And now they're coming in the expansion. We don't know how many. And I, in general, expect like a massive rework of Paragons. You know, they're probably gonna like rework their layouts and how many points we're getting and everything. But the fact that we still have 8 Paragon points per class after 4 seasons is ridiculous. Why have they not added a single Paragon, you know, or even maybe 1 or 2, like, you know, 1 in season 1, 1 in season 3, or whatever, right? You don't have to like add a Paragon board every single season. But, you know, something that, you know, kind of like breaks up the theory crafting meta, that, you know, gives you some options, something to like, you know, play your way, like they advertised it to us, you know, like where we can say, okay, I want to make a Frozen Orb Sorc, but I actually want to have boss damage. So I can use this Legendary Paragon node, and this Legendary Paragon node says, you know, like, maybe you deal extra damage against few targets, but less in AoE. Or I don't know what, you know? You can do many things. So, it just doesn't exist. And so, well, we are forced to do like this one optimal setup that has any kind of viability, and this is it. Thanks, iced coffee, by the way, again. The Necro can only play 1 or 2 builds. Yeah, that's not correct. But yeah, the Bloodlands and both the Blood builds are just completely down bad. Both of them have no single target damage, and this is like back to the same old problem. You need single target damage to be considered a good build in 2024. And then you have Blight, which is very powerful. You have a bunch of Necro stuff, minion stuff that's really powerful, and then you have, I guess, Bone Spear is somewhat okay in the middle. And okay, you have Sever that's like really down bad. That's probably even worse than the Blood builds. I think also this is that Necro has like the least amount of builds, if I'm honest. I mean, not on Maxor actually. I think on Maxor we probably have the most Necro guides. But I don't know. I feel like in terms of like the overarching themes, there's like too little on Necromancer. Okay, there's minions. Okay, that's the dot stuff. Okay, that's the blood stuff. Okay, here's Bone Spear. And then you have, there's Bone Spirit as well, which is pretty good actually. But yeah, realistically, you don't have like that many options for like skills to actually deal damage with, or mechanics to deal damage with, right? Like on Sorc, you have core skills, 5 of them. And, no wait, you have 6 of them actually, right? Yeah, 2 cold, 2 fire, 2 lightning. So you have 6 core skills, and you have 4 mastery skills, and each of them have their own build. And then you have like potentially other shenanigans. And I feel like on Necromancer you just don't have that much. You have like, you know, okay, core skill 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, minions, and a Bone Spirit. And then you have like some really weird shit like Shadow Surfer or something like that. And maybe Corpse Explosion. Okay, there's like some options there as well. But Corpse Explosion is basically just another version of a Shadow dot build. Shadow Surfer is just another version of a Shadow dot build. I feel like it's not necessarily like, you know, a huge difference in terms of like how the build functions compared to like Blight, for example. So it just has a bit of a different feel and animations. The interesting part is that we are just kind of moving away from a kind of balanced game to a more imbalanced game. And I figured that after so many seasons we would probably be moving towards a better spot, right? And I mean, it's understandable that, you know, they just made this tempering system, you know, stuff can be wacky, and even with the PTR, you know, some stuff slips through and is OP and whatever, and, you know, the devs didn't think about every single possibility. I kind of get it, you know? But how did someone even greenlight Imposing Presence ranks as a temper, or 300% bashed cleave as a temper, right? Like, who approved this? You know, where's the head of balancing to say no, we can't do this? Like, where are these people, right? Yeah, I mean, okay, mistakes happen or whatever, right? But it's like, man, like someone sat there and typed out +1 to 2 imposing presence. Okay, what else do we put in this recipe? Ah, +1 to 2 martial vigor. Ah, okay. What else? Ah, yeah, +1 to 2 guttural yell. And then someone was like, yeah, hey, by the way, let's make that masterworking system. That sounds pretty cool. You can rank up your stuff and have like a much more interesting system than just pressing 5 times upgrade on a blacksmith. Oh yeah, that sounds amazing. How do we make that work with passives? Yeah, let's just give it like a +1 rank every 30 upgrades. So you can get +4 if you hit it 3 times with a crit. Okay, so 2 goes to 6. Yeah, sounds fine. And then you're like, Martial Rigor gives 4% damage reduction to elites per rank. And you can put it on 4 different slots, and you can have 3 points on the tree. So that leaves us with a maximum of 27. So 27 times 4, 108% damage reduction against elites. Yeah, that sounds fine. You know, ship it. And I think no one ever thought about this. That day was inevitable. I mean, patch notes tomorrow, guys. So let's see if we continue tomorrow, I guess. It might be bureaucratic issues. Yeah, I mean, you have to see that the Diablo 4 dev team is massive, right? I don't know how many people they have, but we're probably talking about like over 100 devs or whatever, right? Sitting in like 2 different buildings. And, you know, you have like, you know, the one team working on season 1, one team working on season 2, one team working on life balance patches, one team working on mid-season patches, one team working on the expansion, and another team working on the expansion, and another team working on the expansion. And, you know, this is also like why these weird patches happen where sometimes, you know, they merge the new patch of an old fix, and then suddenly that old fix is no longer in the game, you know, some bug fix or whatever, and an old bug comes back because, you know, it was somewhere left in the code or whatever, right? So I kind of get it. It's probably very hard to coordinate all this shit. But do they not have someone who's like, you know, understanding like these like class balance questions, you know, like, hey, can we put martial vigor as a temper? Should we do that? Can we put flay duration as a temper? How does it actually work? You know, oh, should we put crit damage tempers? We have gushing wounds in the game. You know, that seems to be like no one has like this overarching vision of like everything, I feel. Maybe they have someone like this, but, you know, maybe it's just like too much and it's too complex. And as I said, you know, like, of course, a player base of like millions of people will find a lot more shit than, you know, some devs in the office, even if they actually code that stuff. Like, it's always gonna be like this, you know, the players will always be smarter as a collective than the devs. Like, this is just inevitable. So the devs will have to react to what the players find. But the thing is that, you know, some of this stuff could have been obvious from the start, you know, I could have told you before. In fact, I did tell them before about at least some of these things. And then, you know, just nothing happens, and I was like, whoa. You know, we did tell them about flame shield duration. In fact, even in Season 3, it was possible to be permanently invincible as a Sorc, even without flame shield duration tempers. Or attack speed tempers, or whatever. If you really wanted, it was possible. The 200 years collective dev experience quote. Oh man. They balance it by giving Sorcs 1 or 2 ranks to warmth. Yeah, I mean, like in a world where, you know, you don't need like ridiculous amounts of other stuff like flame shield duration, like 1 or 2 ranks to warmth is actually something kind of cool to have. If there was any reason to not run perma barriers as a Sorc to not get instantly one-shot, right? But the only reason why Sorcs can stay alive is number 1, permanent flame shield, and if you don't do that, you know, I have not played a permanent flame shield build so far, and I don't intend to, then the number 2 option is you play permanent at least barriers, you know, because you need that extra life pool to survive the big hits and, you know, to get damage reduction from your glyph and whatnot. So you cannot play a Sorc that actually relies on healing, like warmth. And I mean, having a temper available that has warmth ranks would maybe in the future open up anything like a healing-based Sorc, right? Right now this is not possible. But maybe in the future it's possible. Maybe some, you know, some unique item, maybe get like some extra DR for not having a barrier active, for example, right? So you specifically avoid ice armor and protection passive. And, you know, maybe there's even some synergies with, like, being low life, for example, or something like that, you know? I mean, like, there could be some options like that. Yeah, they could explore. They could just expand the pool of different, like, defensive abilities or whatever. You know, maybe in the expansion you're gonna get a new defensive skill for the Sorc, you know? And that says something, like, you know, has something to do with healing and being not shielded and whatever. And suddenly, like, warmth, ranks, tempers make sense. I think not every single temper needs to make, like, perfect sense in the current meta. And warmth ranks is something that is fine to exist. you know. What is not fine to exist is martial vigor and imposing presence. Because those things are just completely busted compared to warmth ranks, right? Or, you know, 7% dodge chance that you can put on your chest or whatever, right? So this is like kind of the power level of a template that you would expect. And it's maybe fine that certain class-specific options are stronger than generic options. That's expected as well. But it's not fine that they're like 7 times stronger, right? Potentially infinitely stronger if you stack 25 ranks of martial vigor and then just become immune to damage permanently. You know, that is obviously a mistake. So... And then you also have stuff like, you know, Thorns builds, like, you know, Thorns Barb. That is like so powerful because you have this stuff like Imposing Presence Tempers, and then you have Challenging Shout that gives you extra Thorns based on how much life you have. So that's kind of like the same problem that overpower builds had before. Like right now overpower builds are not that powerful, but they will eventually come back. And you're gonna have the same problem again. Overpower builds scale their defense and their damage at the same time. There's no opportunity cost. Every other build type or archetype has to decide, do I go for more damage or do I go for more life? And overpower builds do both at the same time. And this is a problem, I think. Like this was a general problem with overpower builds in Season 2 and Season 3 when, you know, we had like all these blood builds, like Blood Search in particular, and Hoda, and, you know, like Polarize was pretty good. And they all had the same thing. Like you stack more life, you become invincible, and you do more damage. And it's not like just a little bit of more damage from the overpower scaling. It's actually like where most of your additive damage scaling comes from. And these days, it's even crazier because you just have ridiculous amounts of extra life. Not just on a Barb, on all classes, you know, like your base life is 7,957 as a level 100 character. And then you get extra overpower damage based on how much above your base life you are and how much of that you have fortified. And in previous patches you had like 15,000 life, maybe 20,000 life, you know, maybe 25 on a good day. And these days you have 50,000, 60,000, 80,000. Like just overpower builds in fact have actually gained a lot from this patch. They're just so far behind based on other factors. But if those other things are gonna get fixed and single target is not a huge problem anymore, it just so happens that basically every single overpower build in the game is also an AoE build. And we talked about boss damage being the #1 factor for a build's success currently. But if boss damage is not the #1 factor for a build's success anymore in a future patch, if they fix pit bosses or if they give us, you know, Bane of Stricken or whatever, then overpower builds will be back and they will have that same problem again, even worse than before, because you can stack so much life and you get so much damage out of it. And 100% guaranteed, you know, if like in a vacuum they just change pit bosses and let's say they straight up just delete pit bosses from the game, you know, overpower builds, it will not necessarily be like the top meta instantly because, you know, Bash still exists and Flay still exists and whatever. But if those things are also getting nerfed, then suddenly those overpower builds are looking like pretty crazy again, I'm pretty sure. And it's kind of the same thing with Thorns Barb. It's the same thing. Like you stack life, you become invincible, and you deal more damage because of that. Like it makes no sense, you know? Just from like a balancing perspective, you cannot do that. You know, it's a kind of a cool fantasy. Hey, I have 100k HP, I'm a Giga Chat. I'm gonna overpower you now. Bonk. Yeah, sure, and like I get the idea, right? Why they did this. It sounds fun. And with like the name and the fantasy behind it. Like, okay, overpower, it's based on your life and your fortify, and this is like natural mechanics of like barbs and druids, and you know, you have these big bonks that are the overpowers. Yeah, cool. But the reality is, it's just imbalanced as fuck. So, you can't really do that. Like there needs to be, you know, a downside to getting a certain thing. And the thing is, there's no downside on an overpower build, for example. There's only upsides. You stack as much life as you can on every single piece, you go greater life FX, and it uses like a fucking tank that will never die. I mean, if you want to make the game somewhat engaging, then there needs to be a threat from enemies. And they've already like massively reduced, for example, the threat from pit bosses. And I guess that's okay to some degree. I think it's fine that you don't have to go like all in on defense on every single build in order to like actually play the game on high tiers or so. But it still needs to be a threat. And a lot of builds right now, especially on Barbs, they just don't even know what that word means. But casuals don't care about balance. That is very untrue. I mean, it depends on what kind of casuals, and you know, some casuals do, some casuals don't, yeah. But it certainly affects casuals as well. I mean, there are a lot of casual players that come to Maxo every single season. You know, literally millions of people that, you know, read our guides, take one of the builds, and it's usually the S tier builds that they play and that they read, you know, spoiler. Of course it affects casuals, you know. And people have like a good or bad opinion of the season based on their feeling of what they played. And if they play a fun build that's an S tier build, then they're gonna have a good time. And if they play a not fun build that's an S tier build, and they don't feel they have another option, they feel like they can't play a Sorc because Sorcs are down in the gutter and they're the Sorc main, well, they're not gonna play the season. Of course it affects casuals. If they make a Sorc level to 100 and they're like, let's go, I'm gonna try the pit right now, you know, the new feature, I'm gonna have a good time, you know, the vibing. And then they go to a tier 70 and they fight the boss for 3 minutes. And then they get one shot. Well, it's gonna be an alt of 4 and they won't come back. That's how it is. Of course the balance matters, you know. And then they have like their friend who chose to play Barb because gear chat. And then he sees his friend, you know, just like cruising 2 minutes, pit 105 on his bash Barb. He stands in all of the boss attacks, no fucks. And then he looks at his Sorc, you know, gets 2-shot by corpse bows from off screen at tier 70, fights the boss for 3 minutes. Like he's not gonna have a good time, right? And not every, you know, the balance doesn't have to be on point, you know. It's fine that, you know, a build is a bit stronger and a bit weaker than another build, or a certain build has a strength and a weakness. But it's not fine that, you know, we have Barbs that not only are the tankiest motherfuckers around, but they also go the highest. And they do so on like 4 different builds. You know, it's not just that one, you know, outlier build. And I mean, it's okay to have like, you know, also builds that are like simple and, you know, welcoming and easy to play, that are also strong. You know, let's say Bash Barb. You know, Bash Barb is like, yeah, what do you expect from a Barb, right? You don't really expect like super crazy combos or, you know, like stutter stepping and crazy positioning. And yeah, you know, Barb is like Smork, you know, me smash. And that's fine. This is just what you expect from the class. But it's not fine that this is the way to play the game if you want to be as efficient as possible, right? For everyone. And there's nothing even close to it. I mean, okay, technically there are things somewhat close to it, right? Like, let's say this build or Heartseeker, but, you know, some of these are accidents, like Victimize being just bugged. And even so, even like a Victimize rogue is not really on the level of Barb builds. And even Andariel is not on the level of Heartseeker rogue even, and stuff like that. So, and on top of this, it's like way harder to set up, way harder to play, way squishier, and like all these problems, right, that come with that. What started the rant? We talked about Gushing wounds at the start. I'm not sure how I talked about Gushing wounds though. Solution, delete Barb. Solution, make Spiritborn. Make it more OP than Barb. Give it 7 weapons.
Well, there's something special.
In the state of Barbs. I didn't really talk only about Barbs, but Barbs are definitely a huge topic when it comes to balance. It's over 9,000 by the way. That's pretty good. I think the best example of a balanced class right now is actually Druid. I think Druid is currently the poster child of balance in Diablo 4. They have like 3-4 builds, are like all somewhere sitting like around A tier. You have like Wind Shear, you have like this weird Landslide, Earthbreaker build. Then you have like Tornado. And then you have like Lightning Storm. And they're all like really good builds. And you have like some other stuff as well that's like decent and fun, like Boulder and Companions, like in B tier. Like Druid is actually like the dream right now when it comes to balance. And I think this is like where they need to aim. Usually always like it was Rogue in the past, but Rogue does have some pretty crazy stuff right now, to be fair. This Andariel stuff is really good. This Victimized stuff is broken. You have like, you know, the Blizzard Math. I'm not even sure to call them bugs, but technically they're bugs, I guess. Blizzard Math when it comes to the key passive and all that with Precision and Victimize and whatnot. I'm not even sure if like Blizzard is aware that the key passes work that way, or maybe they want them to work that way. I have no idea. It's just kind of strange that they applied the Blizzard Math in that way. And I hope that in the future they're gonna find a better solution to display stats in the game and make a key passive scale the way that you would expect and not in a Blizzard Math way. But this is what we got for now. So in general, Rogue is like too powerful compared to what you would expect it to be. So Rogue is no longer the poster child of balance. It's Druid right now. And I need to bring everything to Druid level, I think. And this would be a lot more interesting. In fact, funny enough, you guys remember that outrage when there was this patch note? Oh, Bash is no longer multiplicative, now it's additive. And everyone was like losing their fucking minds. Oh my god, Bash is dead. Well, it turns out, you know, if they had done that and just like stuck to it, Bash would probably still be a better build than anything that Druid class has to offer. So, you know, they should do that. And I'm surprised they didn't go through with it. But I guess the baby rage is strong. Too strong sometimes. Thanks, Stepster, by the way. Oh, that's a good ring. Good emerald.
Fine indeed.
Was Lamentation 2.0.
Well, hello, shining beauty. Not a bad shame that. Go one more?
What's left, you ask?
How about a quad Uber wording dust level buff for farming? Absolutely nuts. Feels hacked. Yeah, I heard there's like some whirlwind builds going on, and again, that's like thanks to Gushing Wounds. I talked about Gushing Wounds in detail earlier. And it's just that, okay, number one, For some reason, like Dust Devils and Tearer's Might procs and even Holy Bolt procs can apply bleeds through Berserk Ripping aspect, and those bleeds scale off Gushing Wounds, and I guess that is kind of okay, because there's nothing about Berserk Ripping that says it only applies to your skills. Although it does seem a bit weird that it would work with like these non-skill effects, because suddenly you can scale these in unintended ways, like Gushing Wounds, right? Like you have like a certain expected damage output from stuff like Tearer's Might and Holy Bolts, and suddenly you take that and then multiply times 100, and yeah, it turns out that's pretty good if you add 2 zeros. Plus, you know, all the berserking damage and, you know, all these other generic bonuses that barbers have with Warcry and whatever. Yeah, seems nice. Has 3 Uber uniques. Yeah, I mean, at this point, you know, a lot of people have a lot of Uber uniques. You know, people have been doing the Helltide stuff a lot. You can do tormented bosses a lot. Stitch and Stone drop rates have been buffed. It's 1 month into the season. Like, there are people that have Uber uniques. Plenty of those people now. So it's fine to make builds around Uber uniques, and, you know, this is a build, you know. We have an Andariel build here. It's okay, you know. It's cool that there are actually options to use those items in cool ways, you know. It's an Uber unique after all. So it's fine, you know, and if this turns out to be a good build, so be it. And as long as it's not like completely game breaking, and this Roman stuff does not seem completely game breaking, it just seems like, you know, very good. Okay. It's cool. This is kind of what you want, right? Everyone was complaining, oh, Andariel's bad unique. Well, it turns out it's actually not a bad unique. At least for one class. I mean, I can make it like a rogue-only item at this point. I'm not sure if there's any hope for it on any other class. I tried on Druid. That is like the only other class that has some poison synergies. Fun fact. Not exactly a fact. But I'm pretty sure that Andariel's on a Barb would be a lot better than on a Druid. So, it's just that Barb has too many other crazy builds that there's no reason to do it. But I think Andariel's Barb would be way better than Andariel's Druid. Andariel's on Sorc. I don't think so. I mean, you have a lot of like a hit on Sorc. But there's like no poison synergies, there's no reason to run poison stuff. Like, what do you do with Andariel exactly on the Sorc? I mean, Sorc is maybe weak enough for Andariel's procs to matter, actually, so maybe. You know, Sorc has like not that high damage output in general. That maybe doing an Andariel Sorc is actually an option, just because this class is so weak. And you have so much lucky hit. You have non-physical scaling. Yeah, there's like some stuff on Sorc, I guess. There's like a bunch of like decent generic damage increases, like Shredding Blades and Storm Swell. And Frigid Fate. And, you know, these kind of things. And yeah, maybe. Maybe you can do some stuff with an Andariel Sorc. It would be funny. I'm not sure what would be the best option here to like produce a lot of like hits. If I had to guess, it would probably be Firebolt, actually. Like, splitting it in... Is it in 3 or in 4? I think it's in 3. But that definitely adds a lot of lucky hits. And I think Firebolt lucky hit already is not terrible. Plus you can benefit from stuff like Rapid. So maybe actually you want to play Firebolt yet again. The thing is that if you play Firebolt, you have so much damage that you don't want to play Andariel's. What is the next best option for lucky hits on Sorc? Ball Lightning, maybe? Poison Rest on Andy is worthless garbage. I don't think that matters. Like, the Poison Rest on Andy is just flavor. I mean, technically there may be situations where this is actually helpful. On this build in particular, I don't need the Poison Rest. I am overcapped even without it, I guess. Am I? Actually, I do need the Poison Rest. I would miss 18 Poison Rest if I didn't have the rest on the Andariels, so it's actually helpful. But if you do it on a Barb, you absolutely want that poison rest roll, for example, or so. On a Sorc, of course, you don't. On a Druid, you usually go for Auras as well. So it doesn't really matter, but what is important is the poison rest is very good flavor. So they should not remove the poison rest from Andariel's. It belongs to the item, you know. Andariel's Visage has poison rest. This is just a fact. So they should not change that just because it's like a dead stat. You know, I talked about this yesterday as well with like uniques. Like uniques are cool because they have flavor. And I love to have flavorful stats on these items, even if they don't do anything. You just need to make sure that the item itself is like balanced in a way that still makes sense, right? Like, okay, you can put a useless stat like poison rest on it. Let's say for most builds that run Andariel's, maybe you don't care about the poison rest, and it's just like a dead stat. It's fine, you can just increase the stats that and all the other stuff that it has, right? You can make the attack speed value higher, you can make the lifesteal higher, you can make the poison dot higher if you want to give more power to the item. But I think having flavorful stats on uniques is extremely important. It's cool to have these stats, and sometimes it's just a nice little perk as a bonus. You know, I talked about this yesterday with Gore's Devastating Grasp, and I said Gore's Devastating Grasp has attack speed, and I love it. You know, attack speed does nothing for a Whirlwind build. It doesn't interact in any way. It doesn't boost the damage, it doesn't give him more ticks, nothing. But it's cool to have attack speed, because no Whirlwind build would otherwise ever use attack speed on any item, right? Because it doesn't work with Whirlwind. But there are skills in the Whirlwind build that benefit from having more attack speed, you know, your charge, your leap, your steel grasp, you know. It's nice to have this extra, you know, flow, this extra like feel to the build, because you have more attack speed than you would otherwise do, because you're forced to have it, and I love that. You just need to make sure that if you put a useless stat on an item that you would not otherwise want, you would still make the item worthwhile through the other stats or through the other effects. It's the same with like dexterity on 100,000 steps. Let's imagine a world where 100,000 steps is actually a useful item, okay? So you play Walking Arsenal, 100,000 steps, cool. It has dexterity and has a lot of it. I love it, you know, it's flavor, you know, it makes you feel good about having that thing that you would never otherwise have. And suddenly you equip 100,000 steps, and then on your next Paragon board, on board number 5, you're suddenly gonna start unlocking some Paragon nodes that you would otherwise never get, because you have extra dexterity that you would never have on a Barb, and I love it. You know, this is like something that makes some of these items feel a bit special, that gives you like this, you know, this nice little extra that doesn't really matter, but it feels good, you know. It just needs to be like a well-designed item outside of that, you know. And I think what Blizzard very often does is they put like dexterity on 100,000 steps, and they say, yeah, okay, we gave it like a bunch of dexterity. So that's like worth 1 stat out of the 4 stats that the item has. Now let's put 3 more stats on it that are just like regular stats. Okay, here's your movement speed, here's your DR, and here's your whatever. And then they're like, not really thinking about that they put dexterity on it that does nothing, basically, you know? And they don't like go and say, okay, yeah, let's double the movement speed, you know? The dexterity does nothing, let's just double one of the other stats instead, you know? But they don't do that. You know, they make the item weak because it has like, you know, a certain budget. Let's say there's like a budget of 100 power points, right, that they put on an item. And they put like a huge dex roll on 100,000 steps and say, yeah, okay, so this takes out 20 points of this budget. We have 80 more. So 20 goes to the effect and 20 to each of the stats. Okay, 20 are gone because we put dexterity on it. But the thing is that the dexterity is not worth 20 points. You know, the dexterity is worth 2 points. But it's cool. So they need to take basically more points and put them into some of the other stats. As like the power budget, you know. But I don't think that we account for these things. So same way with like Gore's Devastating Grasp that has attack speed. They say, okay, this item has a good attack speed roll, so that's worth like 20 of our points. But it's not, you know, it's worth 2. Or maybe 1, or maybe even 0, you know. So they would have to take that power budget and not cut it by as much because they put like a user stat on it. But I do not want them specifically to remove attack speed from Gore's Devastating Grasp or dexterity from 100,000 steps. I love having that. You just need to buff the other shit on it. Like, this is what makes unique items interesting, you know? Like, if they only put all the stats that we want to have on every single unique item, then why do we even have unique items, you know? What's special about them? Okay, they have like an interesting effect or so here and there, but some of them don't, you know? Some of them just are just stat sticks. And if there's stat sticks of stuff that we have on our items anyway, then what's the point, you know? Why do we care about this unique item over any other item if it's just the same stuff that we want anyway? Everyone says like, oh, please give us better stats on our, you know, Sky Hunter or whatever, right? And they did it, right? And now we use Sky Hunter for a season, and now they made unique weapons obsolete because of tempers. And it's like, yeah, okay, but what makes this item special, right? Sky Hunter is basically not different from any other bow. It's just a damage buff. Now there is some cool stuff involved with Sky Hunter, which is like a resource gain, for example, but it doesn't really matter most of the time. And there's also like exploit ranks, which is kind of cool. So you have like this, you know, just like a cool effect for Sky Hunter. Exploit ranks. You deal more damage to healthy targets. You deal more damage to injured targets. So this changes how a build feels. You know, it makes it interesting to play a Sky Hunter build compared to just a normal bow. Because suddenly you have this, you know, this huge one-shot potential, or you have this huge like execute phase, because you have like +5 ranks to exploit passive. And that gives you like all this like extra here damage at the start and at the end of a fight. So you have like, you know, it's kind of like high damage, low damage, high damage. And it's gonna feel like, you know, more impactful than on other builds on a rogue, for example, thanks to those exploit ranks that are on the Sky Hunter. So this is the stuff that makes these items cool, because it changes how a build feels. Same with the attack speed on Gores. Same with, you know, technically not dexterity on the 100,000 steps, but it does add, you know, at least like this little like theory crafting component of, hey, I have like 100 extra dex on my build now, so which Paragon nodes do I try to activate on board 5? You know, usually only go for 4 boards where you have activated doubled rare nodes. But suddenly you can go for board 5 and you can say, hey, I have this dex, I can activate this and that now as well, so let's try to make a Paragon order around that and try to get something else. And you know, that kind of adds something interesting to making a build, even if it doesn't necessarily change the gameplay itself. And we need a lot more than that. You know, like a lot of unique items is kind of like wasted opportunities in that sense, because it just had like some random bullshit stats that don't really do anything and are not really impactful or flavorful or anything like that either. Like this is like, okay, get like a tiny bit of this or a tiny bit of that, but they don't really do anything, you know, they don't really change how a build flows or feels. And there's like a lot of like wasted opportunity there, I think. I think one tempo on uniques will make them more relevant. Yeah, of course a tempo would make them more relevant. It's just that I don't think this is the solution. Like, I don't want to go back to a world from Season 2 and Season 3 where we have like 7 uniques in every single build, and everyone runs a Tibbot's Will, and everyone runs a Goldslayer or a Shaco, and everyone runs a Banished Lord's Talisman or, you know, whatever. Like, I hate that actually. I love that we have less uniques in our builds, and I think that's excellent. And I think it's cool that there are some kind of like strong generically uniques, like, you know, Shaco or whatever, you know, Stardust. It's fine, you know, especially those Ubers. It's fine that there are some really good items that you kind of just want to have in many builds, but I don't want to just have like 5 unique items in every single build again. I hated that. And it's much more interesting when you can actually like, you know, find cool items, craft them, they have different stats on each of them. So I think it's nice if they like add some kind of upgrade path or something to like, you know, boost the power of uniques, or just rebalance them in a way as well. It's okay, like anything kind of works. I think I would love to do something like a, not exactly a temper, but you know, along the lines of like half to 1 temper in like, you know, a power progression of uniques. But I don't want to get to the point where uniques are just kind of like the all-defining feature again. I think that's really lame. Unless they allow some actual customization on them, you know? And the temper is allowing us some customization, but I think the temper system should be exclusively for legendaries. And you want to have something else for uniques. So something also interesting, but not the same. And there's many ways that, you know, they can build such a system, I think. But yeah, generally uniques being mostly like you use like a certain build defining unique, like a Fractured Winterglass for Frozen Orb, or you know, maybe a Sky Hunter if you have like a really resource hungry, no combo point, precision build on a rogue. Like that's not really a thing right now, but you know, there are circumstances where you could think about this if Sky Hunter was like kind of viable, but it's not. But you know, with a bit of a power boost, it could be an item for such a build. Yeah, I mean, I could also nerf Shaco a little bit. Maybe it's not a terrible idea. I think Shaco is just overstated in general. It's fine, it's an Uber and stuff, but on the other hand, you know, Ubers have become more of an expectation than a rarity at this point. Like, at some point in the season, you know, most people that actually stick to playing a game for, you know, a certain amount of time will have that Shaco. You know, you can basically guaranteed get it just from making 2 characters and farm Iron Wolves, right? And this is it. You have your Shaco. You don't even need to go and farm any bosses. So it's not even like really out of the question for a lot of people to get it. Like it was in the past. And it wouldn't be such a terrible idea that at least when you get to the point where they do give us an upgrade path for uniques, to maybe nerf some of them a little bit, including the Shaco. Because Shaco is already by far the best item in the health slot for almost every build. And if they make it even better, then, well, good night, right? To like any normal helm. So, it's fine, you know, if they bring any kind of unique upgrading to the game, I think it's fine to bring like a slight nerf to some uniques as well. To kind of keep them in line. Imagine a pair of boots, such as the Fallen Rogue Sisterhood, that can spawn 3 rogues to fight alongside you for 10 seconds and use Twisting Blades, Rapid Fire, and Penshot. Something similar to Call of the Ancients and Barb. Yeah, because Shadow Clone and Call of the Ancients worked out so well, right? Those are the skills, man. Everyone loves them. Why make it class specific? I mean, the problem of not making it class specific is... Okay, let's assume that somehow they managed to make this good, you know? Let's say that it's not going to be a Shadow Clone thing. Let's say it's going to be, in some way, extra summons that actually do something and more than nothing. And if we make it cross-class, that means that there will be Barbs that have Unconstrained and they have like 1000% damage while berserking. And all of that will apply to those clones. And this Fallen Rogue Sisterhood item will be a Barb item and not a Rogue item. Because rogues do not have generic damage buffs that would apply to your pets in any way similar to what the Barb can do. It's just how the classes work. So this item will be good for Barbs and not good for anyone else. And then that's a kind of weird champ situation.
Much thanks, friend.
Not a bad.
Hello, shame that. Well, hello, shining beauty.
Better than starting from nothing.
Follow the stars, friend.
Jakob. You reach 100% freeze like a hit and like a hit bonus 40%. You don't freeze everything like me. I have shared misery on my glove. It's really powerful. Skyhunter was fun with Razor Blade. Yeah, I know, there was like some people that played like Thorns Rogue with Skyhunter to get a guaranteed crit. I remember. Oh man, that was such a funny video. I think it was in season 2 or something. There was like some dude who made a YouTube video, Thorns Rogue, and then he made like some clips and it was like showing like 80 million crits with Thorns. I think this was actually season 1 even or something. Before they reworked crit and Vuln, I believe. So, it was like some really high damage value. And then look at the clip in the video, and then the clip was when he had a Blaster Shrine. He crit overpowered something for like 80 million, because Blaster Shrine, in like a T100 dungeon, where it scales with the tier of the dungeon, and the Thorns was actually sitting for like 2 million or something. And then it takes out its screenshot of that, and it puts it in a thumbnail and says like, you know, 80 million crits of Thorns on Rogue, man. The funny part is that most people did not understand what was happening. Like, it's obvious for someone who knows the game, but a lot of people were like, Pog, man, Rudy, look at this! And I looked at this and I'm like, guys, you are fools. Like, you have been bamboozled. Like, you see the explosion going off? And there's like this big orange number, you know, overpower Thorns, by the way. Yeah, okay. Oh man. What a fucking trash content, man, people put out sometimes on YouTube. It's insane. And people believe it, man. That thing had like over 90% upvotes. Like, it's insane. It's like the same shit as like this Arrow Storms Rogue, you know? People make this arrows. I mean, I understand, you know, people want to feel cool, right? Arrow Storms is like, Arrow Storms feels cool, right? I love Arrow Storms personally. It's such a cool effect. You can shoot the arrows and suddenly like this thing rains down. Like, you know, it's a cool fantasy. I love it. You know, and now, wow, they buffed it, man. Plus, like, you know, 200% damage. The aspect is crazy now. Let's put it on a two-handed. Put the other one on the neck. Let's go. Yeah. And then you think, okay, what else do we do with that build? Ah, okay, you know, there's this Heartseeker build. It has good like hit chance. This is played as a Heartseeker. Put Arrow Storms in there. And then these people make their Arrow Storms Rogue build guide. And then show it off and say, hey, new S tier build, man. I destroy pit 80s, 90s, no problem. And they show the speedrun. You know, it's like me yesterday, right? I was doing some testing and I had Victimize spec'd. And I did like a 94 run in like 2.5 minutes or 3 minutes with Victimize on this Andariel's Rogue. And it took me until like 90% progression to even realize, oh shit, I had Victimize. I'm doing like half my damage right now. Whoops. Yeah. So that's exactly the same situation with that Aerostorm stuff, you know? You have two aspects, one on the two-handed, one on the neck, that do literally nothing but look cool, called Arrow Storms. And then you play a good build of it, called Heartseeker. Yeah, of course you can do pit 80s or 90s or whatever with Heartseeker Rogue without two aspects. It's not the biggest deal to lose two aspects and go down 10 tiers, you know? You probably come out ahead. It's not a good build, and certainly not S tier. Because he just took a good build and made it worse for no reason, but it looks cool, you know? Because Arrow Storms ticks for like 50,000 crits when you could be doing 50 million with your Victimize, you know? Yeah, nice. Good build, man. Follow your dreams. And the funny thing is, like, these people, you know, they actually show, you know, like, if you want to make like a serious build guide, of course you need to show the build in action, right? At least when you can, you know, like, in some cases it's not possible. If you have like a theorycraft only build, let's say based on patch notes, and that build doesn't exist yet, of course you can't show that build. But they can maybe try, you know, show some mechanics, show like a test run of, you know, something similar or whatever. But it's not necessarily possible because, you know, something crucial might be missing. But, you know, people make these Aerostorm build guides and they show the build in action and they have damage numbers turned on. And then you pause the video on the boss fight and you look at the damage numbers and then you see Aerostorms. 20,000, 30,000, 50,000 crit. Oh, 60,000 crit. And you're like, yeah, like you do realize, you know, this boss has like 10 billion life in a pit, you know, 90 or something, or, you know, pit 100. But the thing is that most people watching this stuff on YouTube, they have no idea, right? They watch these videos because they want a build, because they don't know how to make a build, or they're looking for a build idea and they think, hey, this looks cool and he's doing 90s, this must be good, right? And they don't actually investigate, or they don't know how to like, you know, grasp if this is actually, you know, working as it should, or if this is, you know, a good combo or anything. You know, they just see something and they see like this clip of like this 3-minute run, and it might be like a cherry pick good run, who knows, right? And then they were like, hey, this looks nice, I'm gonna play this. And they're gonna build exactly that setup, and they're gonna have the Aerostorms, and they're gonna feel cool, and they feel powerful. And no one tells them that, you know, they could do double the damage if they wanted. And all it costs is 600,000 gold at your cultist. And the question is like, do these people just try to clickbait and say, hey, Aerostorms is a cool new thing, this is a good build, you know, follow this, and, you know, they try to like make something of their own, right? They want to be special, everyone wants to have like the next big build, you know, get some clicks, grow their channel. Like, I understand the hustle, but the question is, did they make that video on purpose knowing that Aerostorms is actually shit? Or do they just not know better? I'm not sure what is worse, you know? Do they put out a video without actually testing if Aerostorm does anything? Without really, like, do they make that build and then don't understand what is actually working in that build? Or do they intentionally just make it and mislead people and say, hey, that's my Aerostorm rogue, guys, enjoy. And, you know, I'm cool now. I made that Aerostorm's rogue work. Slowly release the momentum, forceful arrow, shadow, clone, planner. Very reluctantly. Yeah, man, it's like the same thing, right? There's gonna be some people that go like, oh man, I made this Andariel's rogue. Momentum rogue is back, you know? And then, you know, they put like momentum key passive instead of close quarters key passive. And then instead of damage to crowd control, they're gonna like, you know, put a few other stats on their gear. And they don't have a control glyph, they put like another glyph. And then they're gonna play momentum, and they're gonna say, yeah man, tanky Andariel's rogue, rest here, let's go. And then they show like, you know, a tier 90 run. I could literally do this, you know, I could literally just spec momentum right now. I'm gonna be quite tanky, take even the momentum aspect, you know, it feels good, you have lots of healing. You know, you get extra damage reduction here, you get extra damage reduction there, you have movement speed, yeah, it feels good, you know. And then you go with like -5 tiers in a pit. And you can actually run that setup. Feels good, man. But yeah, it just happens that, you know, the rest of the build is so powerful that it can do a shitty suboptimal choice like some momentum, and it's still not terrible. It's the same thing as you take a Heartseeker rogue, you put in 2 aspects that do nothing called Aerostorm and Vengeful, and the build is still not terrible. But you have choices that just make 0 sense, and just make the build weaker than it should be, for no reason. Like, there's an opportunity cost to everything, and, you know, sometimes you pay it, and sometimes you just cannot, you know, with a good conscience, do certain choices. If you care about your viewers. This is how it is. And the best part is, if such a momentum Andariel's rogue were to exist, maybe I just created a self-fulfilling prophecy, I don't know. If someone makes that setup, guaranteed it will not have more than 30,000 life, but they're gonna say, hey, look at this, I only have 30,000 life, but I'm so tanky. And that's actually true. Like 30,000 life, momentum rogue, you know, will probably feel somewhat similar to what I'm doing right now, with the momentum aspect and everything. In terms of toughness, and you're gonna say, hey, you don't need that crazy gear, you can be tanky even with this low life, and, you know, technically you could, like, transform some of your life to, like, extra damage, you know, on Paragons and, you know, on your gear and whatever, right? You can get more decks or whatnot. And somewhat make up for the loss of not having close quarters and having momentum instead. But ultimately it remains a shit choice. But, you know, someone is gonna do it. Yeah, Sheen, thanks so much for the announcement. The game makes it hard to test builds since every build needs very specific stats. Yeah, I mean, okay, I understand that, you know, it is difficult to make, you know, meta builds, make the best possible setup, and, you know, figure it out. Like, you need a lot of game knowledge, you need time, you need to play that build, you need to test things, you know, even if you have a lot of game knowledge, you know, like, I've literally spent thousands of hours playing Rogue, you know, and I've spent, at this point, probably also thousands of hours not playing Rogue, and thinking about Rogue, and looking at planners about Rogue, right? Like, I'm as deep in Rogue, or like even other classes, right? I've done like hundreds of hours of theorycrafting on every class. Just looking at planners, making builds, whatever. You know, I understand all the classes pretty well. I know like basically every unique item. I know every legendary item by heart. I know all of the Paragon nodes. I know all of the, you know, passive nodes, everything. So, you know, I can connect the dots pretty well. Much better than most other people can. And this is only possible thanks to the time investment and to my drive to do these things, right? And a lot of people don't have that, you know, they don't have the time, or they don't have the capacity, or whatever, right? And, you know, they rely on people to make builds for them, and I get it. And there's other people that try to do this and make builds and be a content creator and whatever, that, you know, have a different mindset in how they approach making a build. You know, some people will just never test mechanics, or they have no idea how to test mechanics, and they just like feel it out, right? You know, they just try things and see what happens, right? And yeah, this feels good. You know, I'm also a little bit like that. You know, I'm a bit like, okay, I try a certain thing, and I care a lot about making a build feel good, more than I care about making like the most optimal DPS setup. You know, like I also play hardcore. You know, I have to do other considerations like, can I actually survive this build? Is this actually a playable build, you know, for me? You know, especially these days, that actually matters. You know, I just cannot do certain things on hardcore. I cannot make 100% dodge rogue on hardcore. It just won't happen. You know, you will die. You cannot make a perma-flame. Okay, technically you can make a perma-flame shield, but I don't want to do a perma-flame shield Sorc, at least not outside of like a hectic build or something, you know. If you make like an Ice Blades perma-flame shield Sorc, you will die at some point. Because something will go wrong, your Ice Blades will be bigger, the enemies will not be vulnerable. You know, at some point you will die, and it's just a softcore build. Okay, so this happens. And other builds, other people just have like, you know, a different approach, or they just, you know, some people really care about having the most damage output. You know, they want to see that 1 billion Andariel tick, or they want to see that 1 billion victimized explosion on Heartseeker, and they go like full glass cannon, and they're like god gamers, you know, like Mippy. And you know, someone like Mippy, if you look at his planners, they are probably like 5 times more glass cannon than my planners, for example. Or maybe Dark Side as well, right? This doesn't make them bad builds, or this doesn't make their builds, you know, worse or anything like that. It doesn't make them like a worse theory crafter necessarily. They just have a different approach, you know. If you look at Northar Sorc planners, it's the same story. He fully embraces the softcore mentality. You know, his planners, Sorcs have like 20k life, 30k life maximum. Like my Sorcs have 50k life, you know, that's how it is. And, you know, I like having a build that feels good more than I like having a build that feels strong. I just want to have fun. Because it doesn't really matter if you're very strong, but it does matter that you have fun. Because if you don't have fun, you will not play as much, you will not grind as much, and you will just not like the game, right? And you'll not like the build. And then what's the point? Like, if you don't have fun with a build, then why do you want to play that build? And that is like more what matters to me. And it doesn't matter for everyone, you know, some people just want to have the biggest damage number, and that's totally fine. It's just a different mentality, and certain people follow my builds because I have this mentality, and other people follow Northar's builds because he has that mentality. And other people really like Uber-Nix, so they follow Rob's builds. That's just how it is, right? So... bigger number good, yeah. You were proud when you saw it was so close to max rolls? Let's go, then. Yeah, the thing is that, you know, for like knowledgeable blasters that try to make a build, you will generally arrive at very similar conclusions as long as you have all the information available. The problem really is the unavailability of information. Like, the game is completely filled with like bugs and unintended interactions and Blizzard math and, you know, all this kind of bullshit. And it has been the case since Season 0, and, you know, every season they introduce more bugs, they fix a few of them, there's more in the game, and to this day there's like stuff that has been bugged since open beta, or since closed beta, that was never addressed, you know, stuff that we told them about, like, you know, 1.5 years ago, 2 years ago, or whatever, right? So, you know, that has still not been fixed. And that's just how it is. And, you know, if you look at a tooltip, then you would think, okay, this looks good and this looks bad. But then you look at what builds actually are being played, and then you're like, why is that a thing? And that's because the tooltip is not the truth, right? People think that the tooltip is the truth, but the tooltip could not be more wrong in many cases, you know? The tooltip is so wrong on almost anything you see in the game. And you cannot trust the tooltip, you know, I cannot overstate this. Do not trust the tooltip, ever. There's no reason to look at tooltips. That's the sad truth. So if you try to make a build, and if you try to theorycraft stuff, you know, I actually ran exactly into that problem, you know, I was theorycrafting a lot of stuff, you know, before launch, you know, like, I was theorycrafting my race build for 1 to 100, you know, and I got the world first solo hardcore and whatever, right, it kind of worked out. Based on, you know, literally sitting here for hundreds of hours, you know, obsessing over Diablo 4, and especially the rogues, and, you know, trying to put together the pieces, and you know, I had like sheets and sheets and sheets in Google Sheets, like, you know, I had like builds mapped out, you know, in Google Sheets, you know, which aspects, which stats, I had the math done, how much damage do these things do, what Paragon knows, you know, everything, you know, and this is how I theorycrafted before we had the full planner and everything, you know.